Okay, today we are on day 63 and we're in Numbers 2. And I think I kind of quickly went over Numbers 1. So I kind of wanted to go back and reiterate a little bit of what God was doing in Numbers. And in Numbers is when God called Moses and Aaron to take a consensus. And I think there's several reasons why God called them to do that. And it's because he wanted all the able-bodied men over the age of 20 to be counted for war. And it just shows you today and back in the biblical days, there's times of peace and there's times of war when we have to stand up for what's right. But what the Israelites were fighting for is God was taking them into a land that he had promised, the promised land that God had promised to the Israelites. And at that time, the land was being inhabited by really evil, paganistic people. And God knew that if the Israelites infiltrated and lived amongst the people who had evil practices, they even burned their children on altars, and horrible atrocities, prostitutes in the temples, worshiping multiple gods. Well, God's just way, way smarter than we are. And he knows that if we infiltrate with those people, they will probably influence his people more than his people will influence them. I mean, Moses did leave for 40 days and they made a golden calf and started worshiping it. Only 40 days when Moses was gone, saying, who knows if he's even coming back? Who knows when he's coming back? And melted down their jewelry, and basically the rest is history. So God wanted to count all the able-bodied men, and I think also God was showing his power. He wasn't just leading around a little Israelite family. There were 603,000 able-bodied young men. I mean, just men. We're not counting the women, and we're not counting the children. So God had to take care of, I'm guesstimating, 1.5 million plus, because obviously they were very fertile people, because God kept saying, if you follow my ways, follow my statutes, you won't even be infertile. That's a promise from God. So I'm thinking they had a lot of children, and that's why they grew to be such a huge nation in relatively a small time frame. So God was showing his magnificence. But it's important to note that the Levites never went to war. They were always called to minister at the tabernacle and in the tent, and they took care of all the utensils used. They had to properly wash. They did all the sacrifices. They were basically the ministers and the evangelists of what we have today. They were there specifically to hold the people accountable and fulfill God's practices of what he needed us to do, which was the blood atonement for the sacrificial lambs. And remember, God wanted us and still wants us today to bring us his best. Don't bring some feeble, spotted, diseased animal to sacrifice. God says, I want you to bring me your best. And that's what God wants us to do to this day. Okay, we are in Mark 11. And this starts out, once again, of the religious leaders trying to catch Jesus, trying to plot to have him killed. So they walked up to Jesus and they said, by what authority are you doing all these miracles? Because it says that people were marveling at the teachings and the miraculous things that Jesus was doing, healing all kinds of diseases, casting out demons, the leopard skin in an instant when they'd be covered in white and diseased. Instantly, their body would be healed. So all the people around them were marveling, and that completely threatened the religious leaders because A, they couldn't do that. They didn't have the faith, and they didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, and sent to this world to redeem, to heal, and to restore mankind. They did not want to accept that. So they questioned Jesus about it. And Jesus said, well, what authority do you think John the Baptist came and baptized people? And they talked amongst themselves, like Saturday Night Live, talk amongst yourselves. And they said, if we say he came on the authority of God, then we're in trouble, because Jesus will say, well, then why did you believe John the Baptist and not believe me? But if we say he didn't come on the authority of God, then they were afraid of the people. There are those people pleasers we've been talking about for a long time. So they said, we don't know. And Jesus said, well, then I won't tell you on what authority I came from. So just as an FYI, don't argue with God, because we're never going to win an argument with God. That's just the way it is. He's God, right? So the next story is about a man who had planted a vineyard, and he leased the land out to have workers come and work in it. And he sent 2 servants to work with the people who leased the land, and they had beaten up both of them and kicked them out. Well, then the vineyard owner says, I will send in my own son, my heir, and surely they will not do that to him. Well, isn't this story familiar? You know, all through history, pastors, missionaries, evangelists have been persecuted for the gospel's sake all over the world. And ultimately, our leader, the heir, the son, was crucified, just as the vineyard owner's son was sent in. So when Jesus tells these stories, he's actually relating it to true life, because he knew what the Lord was going to do. And he knew that Lord was going to win, but he also knew that people would fail. So it says here, if the owner was killed, what do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do? Jesus asked. I'll tell you, he will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard to others. Didn't you ever read this in the scriptures? The stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful to see. Well, you know, a lot of Jewish people, where Christ actually came in man form to preach to them the gospel, they rejected him. Not all of them. It even says in the Bible that many of them marveled when he went into the synagogues and not only preached, but laid hands on the sick and they recovered, and the demon possession was, you know, Jesus kicked the demons out of people's bodies and rebuked the demons. Lepers were healed, cripples were healed, the blind received their sight. And the Pharisees, a lot of them, the leaders, still couldn't accept that Jesus was the Messiah. So what does God do? He goes to others who would accept them. And that's basically what's happening in this day today, in this world. So the last story that I love is the Pharisees wanted once again to stop Jesus and to catch him. And they said, well, Jesus, should we pay taxes? And Jesus said, give me a coin. So they showed him a coin and they said, whose symbol and whose face is on this coin? And they said, Caesar's. Then Jesus looked at them and said, give to Caesar what is due to Caesar, and give to God what is due to God. And if I was standing there, I'd have gone, booyah! There you go, Jesus. Try to top that one. Okay, we are in Psalm 47, and there are some verses that just makes my day. These are my favorites. It says, for the Lord Most High is awesome. He is the great King of all the earth. He subdues the nations before us, putting our enemies beneath our feet. You just gotta love that. And at the very last in this day's reading, it says, "For all the kings of the earth belong to God. He is highly honored everywhere." Well, they may not recognize that now. People may not know that God is the King of the universe now, but they will. And God promises us that every knee shall bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord at one time or another. So let's do it now so we can live our lives for Him and have heaven on earth. How fabulous is that? And I love what this next proverb says in Proverbs 10:25. It says, "When the storms of life come, the wicked are whirled away, but the godly have a lasting foundation." So when we live our lives for Jesus, we have a solid rock foundation. And we just spoke in the Old Testament today, no, it was in the New Testament, excuse me, that the stone that the builders rejected is now the cornerstone, and that is Jesus, and He is our strong foundation.